A 58-mile ambulance ride that cost more than 10 grand.
I'm not against paying a medical bill, but this is just obscene and unreasonable.
Why a law that's meant to stop out-of-network bills in emergencies doesn't apply to ambulance rides.
You shouldn't have to, in that moment, wonder, am I going to be able to afford this care?
Plus,
it seemed like it was a scramble and somebody made the decision to just ticket the residents, get them out of the way, and figure it out later.
their cars were ticketed and towed with little notice.
Almost impossible for somebody in that 5 minutes or 10 minutes to notice that there was a sign placed in the yard and then move their vehicle.
How Contact 6 got 37 parking citations voided, and the city of Milwaukee to admit its error. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I am joined this week by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
And we are joined once again by Contact 6 reporter Jenna Sachs.
Hi.
Welcome back, Jenna.
Thank you.
We are recording this episode on, what is today? It is Wednesday, December 10th. Is that right? No, it's the 11th, isn't it? It is.
The 11th.
It is.
Bummer.
Wednesday, December 11th, and we will be releasing this on Thursday, December 12th. And I've lost my... Here we go. Today we are talking about some unexpected expenses. And boy, there's a lot to talk about with these. For one family, it was an ambulance bill in the mail, a really frustrating bill and frustrating situation. And for some neighbors near UW Milwaukee, talk about frustration, it was a tow truck loading up cars outside their windows. All of these people wrote to Contact 6 hoping to get their charges waived, or at least to raise awareness about what they feel are unjust expenses. We're going to tell you who got their bills waived and who is still waiting right after the break. And we are back on Open Record. A 3-year-old law called the No Surprises Act brought sweeping consumer safeguards to medical billing in the in the United States. The law protects people in health emergencies from out-of-network balance bills. But ambulance rides are a notable exception. That has prompted some states to take action to protect consumers. Jenna, this is not your first story on this subject. You've been covering this for a while. In each of your reports, you introduce us to a new family. Who did you talk to this time, and what was their really frustrating experience?
Sure. This time I spoke with Ryan and Sarah Nelson in Sheboygan. On October 31st of last year, their son, Simon, who was 1 year old at the time, was suffering from croup. And they took him to an urgent care center at Aurora Medical Center of Sheboygan. And the staff there really recommended that he be monitored overnight. And they don't provide that kind of care in Sheboygan. So they said, we need to transport him to Children's Wisconsin. We spoke with the doctors over there. They're in agreement that he should go there. So the urgent care center arranged an ambulance ride for Simon to Children's Wisconsin, and they needed specific medications on board that ambulance, which kind of narrowed down who they could call, but eventually they got Superior Ambulance to come and do this interfacility transit ride. Halfway through this 58-mile ride, Simon started coughing in a way that indicated his airwaves were getting tighter, so they did give him some ephedrine through like a mask as a nebulizer mist, and he got to the hospital just fine, spent the night there, and was released the next morning. 30 to 60 days later, the family gets a bill for the ambulance ride in the mail, and it's more than $10,000, which they found rather alarming. But they thought, hey, we'll put it through insurance and see what happens. And even after insurance, they still owed quite a bit of money.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack with this, because seriously, croup, especially at a young age like that, is terrifying. And so, of course, you want the best care for your child. And yes, let's go in that ambulance, because that's the way we're going to get there with the treatment necessary. Now, the Nelsons did have insurance, and then they even had like a secondary insurance. So how did that help? Did it cover any of that $10,000?
It did. And to your point, in these kinds of emergency situations, you're really trusting the doctors, and the doctors say we should take this ambulance and go to the hospital. So they took that advice. They had 2 insurance plans at the time because Ryan actually was transitioning between jobs. So he had 2 insurance, one called Centivo and one called All Savers. And between the 2 of those plans, they covered another $3,000 to $4,000. But even after those 2 insurance plans provided coverage, they still owed nearly $7,000 for this ambulatory ride, which they thought was predatory, frankly. They thought it was too high.
One of the things, I mean, right off the top, it's super relatable, right? Like your kid is suffering something, you don't know it's croup, you don't know what it is, you know they're in bad enough shape that you go to urgent care, and then they're there, and you're just saying, please take care of my child. What do we need to do to make them well? And they say they've got to go to Children's Hospital. That's serious, right? Okay.
Right.
Whatever you say, let's go. Is it always true, though? I mean, this can't be the first child who's been transported to Children's Hospital from an urgent care. Is it always a $10,000 ride?
Well, it depends on the ambulance provider and what they're charging, because every ambulance provider has their own base rate. And that is something we looked into in this story about what the base rate was for their ambulance provider versus other ambulance providers. And their company, Superior Ambulance, does charge more money for these ambulance rides.
You also talked to me even after the fact about the tier pricing that a lot of ambulance services have, based on patient needs. And obviously, if they need more, it's a higher tiered plan, per se, that cost more.
So Simon received something called Specialty Care Transport, or SCT, which is the highest level of care you can provide. It basically means that ambulance has all the equipment and medication that you might need in an emergency. Simon did not have a hectic ride. He was mostly just hanging out in his car seat, which was strapped to a bed. He was not being worked on. There was no CPR or anything like that, but they had the ability to provide that kind of care should an emergency happen. So that costs more than other types of care that are further down on that tiered scale.
Well, and being one, that's sometimes with the medicine and the treatments, an adult can take a certain medicine or treatment, whereas a child sometimes can't.
Right, and there was some discussion because when the doctors ordered this ambulance, they actually ordered a lower tier of care. But when Superior reviewed this request for an ambulance, they saw, well, the specific medication you're requesting is something that's only available on this highest level of care.
Okay, so I'm going to step back from it because that's a key point here. It was Superior that bumped it up. The company that's going to get the most money out of this is the one who decided we have to bump you up to a higher level.
Right, and Superior would say sometimes doctors don't know what level they're actually requesting when they send it. They say they might ask for this lower level of care thinking that's appropriate, but when they review it, they say, actually, if you want that specific medication available for a child in a nebulizer, it has to be this level of care.
I guess what stands out to me, and again, I'm coming at this completely from the outside. I haven't studied it and researched it as you have, but I think when I hear highest level of care available, I'm thinking maybe I watch too many, police shows or something. Yeah. I'm imagining they're rushing someone to the hospital. They're hitting them with the paddles. They're like, the person's been in a terrible car crash or they fell out of the 10th story of a building.
Right.
This is a 1-year-old who went to the urgent care because they were sick.
Right.
And this is the highest. Is there anyone who backs it up and says, yeah, in fact, that's what they needed was the highest possible level of care?
That is information coming from Superior alone. I don't have any information that disputes it. I have spoken with experts in medical billing in the past, and they say there is a cost of readiness, there is a cost of having specific technology and specific medication on board. But as to that one medicine that Simon got, I did not speak with other ambulance providers about whether it would be that kind of care, but I do know that they had a limited number of ambulances that could respond in this case. But for the family, they aren't given the opportunity to shop around.
Right.
They don't get to know this is going to cost you more if you go with Superior.
You trust the doctors that they're going to look out for the best interest of the patient. You trust that the doctors, when they request the ambulance or other treatment and care, that you are getting the best of whatever it is, because it is your family member, it's your friend, it's your whatever.
Right. And we've spoken a bit about cost. I can break it down for you because when we did our last report on this in 2023, we solicited rates for SCT care from similar ambulance providers who do this kind of interfacility transit.
So even if you need this highest level of care, what will the different providers
they
cost?
They could do it
okay.
in many cases. So I spoke with Lifestar, Orange Cross, Bell Ambulance, and MMT, and we mentioned this base rate. So they all have a base rate between $1,900 and $2,400. Superior Ambulance has a base rate of $6,600. So right away, the base rate is higher.
The others, or more than triple.
And if you look at these ambulance bills, it's not just a base rate. There are additional charges for medications that are given. There's also something on every bill, which is a charge per mile of transit. And there's a difference here, too, because other providers charge between $20 and $30 per mile. That's what they reported to us. Superior, on the bills we reviewed, charged $60 per mile.
Does
that's
Superior explain
almost
why
double in both cases.
those rates are so much higher? Have they said, is there something about their service that would justify those costs?
Right. Well, there are challenges in the ambulance industry right now, but this is something everybody is facing. They're having trouble with high overhead costs, with low Medicare reimbursement rates. They're having issues recruiting and retaining staff, but those aren't issues that Superior alone faces. So when we speak with Superior about this, they basically tell us, we can't speak to what other ambulance providers charge. We can say that our base rate reflects our overhead costs, the costs of readiness, our prompt response times, medicine, technology, training, and basically having the staff able to respond quickly. They say the issue here isn't what their charge was. They feel it's that the insurance companies wouldn't cover it. In our past reporting, we've spoken with insurance companies who have said this is obscene. You shouldn't be charging 3 to 4 times what the Medicare reimbursement rate is for these rides. So in the past, insurance companies have told us they felt that Superior's bills were just way above and beyond what was reasonable.
I think it comes back to your earlier point, which is you don't get to shop around. I think about if I was going to buy a $10,000 used car, I'm going to sit down with a salesperson and we're going to go over this line by line. I'm going to try to get them down and we're going to go back in a negotiation. I would at least be aware of what they're going to charge me before I sign on the line.
What are you going to say, though? No? I mean, okay, you're still going. But I'm like, if an ambulance is like 10,000.
Maybe I walk away and I don't take the car, right. But the point is, I'll know up front. And I'm thinking about this from an idea of competition. The idea that their $6,000 or $6,600 versus somebody else's $2,000, that is a choice that I can make as a consumer. Maybe you say it's your overhead. If someone comes to me and says, do you want Superior or do you want this one? But if you just go, you're getting Superior, you don't have a choice. Right, so you pay what they charge, and we'll see. And so
don't always have time either, though.
Right.
If you're in an emergency.
So I recognize medical situation is different. I guess that's my point, though, is you don't get the opportunity to choose as a consumer.
Yeah. Right.
These parents in this case, they got Superior and they got the bill.
Right. And so one thing that I wanted to talk about was the No Surprises Act, because this is supposed to avoid surprise medical bills in a number of situations, although ground ambulances aren't included. So I'll go back because the No Surprises Act went into effect January of 2022, and it basically protects against out-of-network balance bills in emergency situations, and at the same time, it protects against out-of-network bills at in-network facilities. So let's say you're having a baby at an in-network facility, and then the anesthesiologist, as it turns out, is out-of-network. You won't get an out-of-network bill under the No Surprises Act. Air ambulance rides are included in the No Surprises Act. Ground ambulances are not. It's a notable exception. And that's relevant because the Kaiser Family Foundation found that 2/3 of all emergency ground ambulance rides in Wisconsin result in an out-of-network bill. So these are costly bills when people are getting them. So why are ground ambulances excluded? Because there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach to ground ambulance rides. There's differences between states when it comes to regulations and even between communities. In some places, it's publicly funded. In some places, it's private funding. In a rural area, it may be totally different staff and equipment versus in a city. So with all these differences between what kind of services ambulance providers are offering, they left that out, saying we're going to form this committee. We're going to have a task force that meets and analyzes this issue and comes up with recommendations. So they did that, and actually it wrapped up recently. This task force studied data, spoke with ambulance providers, insurance providers, heard testimony from patients, and they came up with a list of recommendations recently, which they sent to lawmakers, basically saying we have a broad consensus here that the consumer needs to be taken out of the middle. There needs to be a set rate for what ambulance providers must accept from companies. And some people say there should be a federal law regulating this, applying to everybody, and others prefer a state-by-state approach. And so far, about 18 states, not including Wisconsin, have some sort of protections in place when it comes to out-of-network bills for ground ambulance rides.
New
but again,
legislative session
nothing in the
coming
works
up.
here.
I was going to say, new legislative session coming up. Do we know if there's any plans for a bill?
I have not heard of anything in Wisconsin. I know that there's this consumer advocacy group, PERG, that had a member on that task force. I interviewed her for this story, and she said, we are speaking to lawmakers in D.C. right now, trying to find sponsors for a bill, but there's no bill written yet.
All right.
Where does the Nelson bill stand right now?
So they reached out to us because Superior had continued to extend their bill and extend it, and finally they said, you have to pay this now. We reached out to Superior, and they did pause the bill again, and Superior said they're reaching out to the insurance companies, and they're asking the insurance company to better understand why they charged what they did. It doesn't sound like Superior is changing its bill, but it's appealing to the insurance companies saying, will you pay us more, essentially?
More, yeah.
I don't know how that's going to go. Again, the Nelsons feel that Superior has already been paid enough, and Superior does stand by their charges, saying this is just the cost of running our business.
They may be stuck with this, but they will want to see change, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, the Nelsons are very informed on this. Part of the reason they reached out to us is because they did a lot of research on the No Surprises Act and ambulance bills. They found our previous reporting on this topic and reached out saying we wanted to let people know this is still happening. And we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about what other states are doing, because Indiana just passed a law that's going into effect in 2025 that protects Hoosiers from out-of-network balance bills, saying that, ambulance providers must accept payment up to 400% the Medicare reimbursement rate, or whatever the in-network rate is, whichever is higher.
There may be future capital testimony to come. We'll see.
Probably.
Coming up, their cars were ticketed and towed away in the course of 25 minutes. How Contact 6 was able to get their citations voided. We'll talk about that after the break. And we are back on Open Record. Neighbors in one Milwaukee neighborhood say they needed more time to move their cars before they were ticketed and towed away. Boy, we had a lot of campaign visits
We did.
this last fall. It happened hours before a presidential campaign event after parking restrictions went into effect. Jenna, what happened on October 17th?
So on the afternoon of October 17th, Vice President Kamala Harris was visiting UW Milwaukee. And as we have learned through all of these visits we had from presidential candidates, when these candidates come to town, there are parking restrictions in place. There are temporary towaway zones that are set up. So early the morning before that visit, around 7 a.m., parking restrictions went in place on Kenwood Boulevard. This is just very close to the Union, just down the street from the Union. This area usually has 1 hour parking starting at 7 a.m. and neighbors are used to parking their cars and moving them at 8. They have 1 hour in the morning, they move them at 8 o'clock.
I've done stories in the past, by the way. That's a heavily ticketed area, so
Yeah.
the people who live there must know.
They know what it is.
We know what our
It's-
limits
yeah.
are. Yeah.
Right. So the problem was these cones went up in the morning and they felt, and the signs saying, hey, temporary towaway zone has been set up, and they say we just did not have enough time before they started ticketing cars and towing them away and relocating them. We heard about one mom who lives on the street who was getting her kids ready for school, saw the cars being ticketed and loaded onto a tow truck and ran out in her bathrobe. And her next door neighbor was a student who had a roommate leave early that morning who called her and said, you need to get out here, they're going to tow your car. And we even spoke with another student who said, I came outside at 8 o'clock and my car was gone.
What time were they doing all this towing?
So I can break this down for you
that's
because
This is just my favorite part
Yeah.
because there's so many times where we do stories where it's like we are taking one person's word and another person's word and we say, here are the two sides of the story.
But just setting the timeline, you said the cones went up at 7.
yes, I have a timeline and we know exactly what it is
Exactly.
because there was surveillance video from a landlord on the street who contacted us, Aaron Wilson. So his tenant called him up saying, please look at the cameras because I just got a ticket and I don't know what just happened. So at 6:59 a.m., the video shows Milwaukee Parking Services places a temporary towaway zone sign on their block. At 7:09 a.m., which is 10 minutes later, parking enforcement is there and they're issuing citations.
10
Yeah.
minutes?
10 minutes.
Blink.
At 7:21 a.m., so that's 22 minutes later, a tow truck arrives on the block, and 2 minutes after that, it drove away with the first vehicle on board. So in a span of 24 minutes, a car was already ticketed and towed away. And I spoke with the owner of that vehicle. I was able, Tim is in the room, he's my photographer. Actually, you weren't with me that day. I was trying to find the vehicle, so I walked around the block looking for the vehicle I saw on this tow truck. We left a little note on the windshield
Yeah.
and said, call us, tell us what happened to your car. And the student basically said, I came out at 8 o'clock, my car was gone, and there was a number to call on one of the street signs. I found out my car had been relocated near Capitol and Holton near the Walmart. It was parked on the street.
So they didn't-
How
it
far
didn't-
away is that? It didn't
So
go
it
to a
didn't
tow lot.
They
No,
just
no,
parked
no.
it somewhere else.
They just relocated it. So
How far away? Like walkable?
No, you'd have to drive there. So They got there and they picked up their car. There was a $150 citation on the windshield. I mean, they didn't have to pay tow lot fees, but at the same time, they were saying we feel like our rights were violated in this situation because when we parked our car last night, it said we had until 8 a.m. to move it. And they placed signs before then. That's not fair.
The whole setting the sign down and then immediately ticketing, I say immediately, not quite, but almost immediately,
10 minutes
ticketing and towing.
Basically
that's pretty immediate. It almost feels like something out of like, I don't know, some sort of a candid camera situation. Like, you know, let's see what these people do. That doesn't make any sense. But I guess maybe poor planning on the city's part? What in terms of planning for the presidential candidate? What happened?
Right. So I did reach out to DPW, the Department of Public Works, and I will say they responded very promptly and they took it seriously right away. They looked into it and they quickly determined that car owners did not get proper notice before the citations were issued. They said the vehicles should have received a warning and been relocated but not fined, and they said penalties should only have applied to those who parked after those signs went up at 7 a.m. when the signage said they could no longer park there. So because of this error, they looked into their records and found 7 cars on Kenwood had their citations voided or refunded, and another 30 cars that were over on Downer Avenue also had their citations voided or refunded. And they said there may be a few people who were cited after the signs went up who got off basically on this case, but we can't differentiate. So 37 people got their $150 citations.
What time was the actual event?
I don't remember. It was early or late, sometime in the afternoon.
So because it made me wonder, you know, if there was an urgency to get them off the street by 7:30 for some reason rather than 8 when they would have been ticketed anyway.
Right.
If there was, then why wasn't there more advance notice than 7 a.m.? Maybe something the night before. Hey, tomorrow morning, please make sure your cars are gone.
You know, I asked neighbors if they got anything, if they saw any signs. They said no, there was no notice at all. I asked DPW if they're required, and they said no. But I mean, they do have to adhere to the parking restrictions.
What's a normal, like if they're, do you know, or does DPW
basically they
speak
just
to that?
have to adhere to current parking restrictions.
Okay.
So in this case, the sign says 1 hour parking starting at 7 a.m. So they need to put that signage up by 7 a.m., but they have to wait to tow those cars until an hour later and ticket and tow, right? That's when they start to have violations. But if you park the night before and there's no sign up telling you that it's going to be a violation by the normal time. Right. So it doesn't sound like they're required to put up signs or hand out flyers or let people know that there's going to be a parking restriction, but they do have to make it fair to the people who park under the normal rules.
So to give DPW credit, they took
did.
responsibility.
Yep, they totally
they voided the tickets.
Yeah.
What kind of reaction do you get from some of the people who had their tickets voided?
They were really excited. They were just excited that it worked. You know, they took this big step of contacting the media. Some of them were pessimistic that it would make a difference. One man I spoke with said, I already talked to them and they agreed to reduce it to $60, but they wouldn't, you know, get rid of the ticket altogether. So I think they were pleasantly surprised by how it played out and that the city took accountability and obviously happy they didn't have to pay those tickets.
I know that's one part of the city where just parking your car is
People
always
have a lot of
risky.
Beef with parking services.
There's not many places to park, and there are a lot of cars, so tickets are a regular thing.
Right.
Well, we are going to take a break, and when we come back, Jenna, you helped those neighbors get more than $5,000 in tickets waived, but still ahead, the total amount Contact 6 has helped consumers save in 2024. We are going to look back on another exciting year, and we'll do that right after the break. We are back on Open Record, and we are getting close to the end of 2024. It's been another big year for Contact 6. So you've been looking into the numbers. You always kind of assess, where are we? What have we seen so far in 2024?
Well, I spoke with Annette, who is our associate producer, this morning. She handles all of our off-air cases, which is the majority of them. Most of our cases don't end up on air, but we're working behind the scenes to resolve cases every day. So she says, as of today, we've saved our viewers about $500,000 this year.
Yeah.
Yay, snaps. And our total resolution number is 216 cases for the year.
That's great.
Which is a good number of cases to be resolved. And I always like to get the smallest resolution and the largest resolution. We do have a number of cases that don't result in any money saved at all. It's
Doesn't
just
mean
like
that they're not important cases to
Right,
resolve.
right.
They're just
It
not
could be
dollar
like, they
figures.
took away my handicap parking space and we got it back. It's hard to put a value on that, but that's an example of a case. case that wouldn't, result in any dollar amount. But our littlest resolution of the year was $30, and it was someone who shipped a package and it was guaranteed to be somewhere by a specific date, and it wasn't. And he wanted a refund, and we got him that refund for the package that did not arrive in one day. And then our largest resolution, we actually featured this in one of our resolution reports, actually. A woman named Sade, she had a fire in her house, and she had difficulty getting her insurance company to send her payment for repairs. They promised to send her a good amount of money. They never sent it, and it was being drawn out. She was living in temporary housing, and we were able to get her $60,000 sent to her.
$60,000.
Yeah, and that was a tough one because you're seeing a family that's displaced. They're not able to get to school the regular way. It's just a big inconvenience living in this temporary housing, and they just wanted to get the work underway, and they couldn't do it until this was all figured out and the checks arrived.
I think of as you're going through that list and the dollar amount of over $500,000. We just talked today about a family that has this $7,000 bill, and they didn't get their money back, but you spent a lot of time. It's a really important story. It's a really important issue. It's one that there may need to be some sort of legislation to address it, and yet it doesn't even factor into that total. It tells me that there is a lot more work even beyond that $500,000 that Contact 6 is doing.
Right. I mean, we respond to every person who submits to our segment. If it meets the criteria of what we handle, we will take their complaint and we will send it word for word to the business and ask the business to take a look and see whether a resolution is appropriate. The business will hopefully send us a response, and we'll pass that back to the consumer. And sometimes that's all it takes, is that outreach, getting someone at the company to pay attention, maybe who didn't know about it before or who wasn't giving it the attention it deserved, and to say, let's figure this out for this consumer. So sometimes it just helps to cut through that customer service clutter that people run into when you're talking to people on the phone and you don't know where they're located, and you're getting a different person every time and a different answer every time you call. So this kind of cuts through all that and goes straight to the top.
And even some of those, some of the cases that Contact 6 does not take on, Annette is so great about emailing that person with resources.
Right.
If it's neighborhood, if it's lemon law type stuff, like just different resources, so people aren't just sending an email into the ether and crossing their fingers.
Right. So if you experienced a scam, for example, she can tell you where to report it, who you should speak to in terms of police, who might handle that kind of case, and just provide general information. That's an example of a case we wouldn't typically handle. If we say this is very obviously a common scam that we've heard about before, we're sorry, but this is the next step you can take because we are not going to be able to help you get that money back.
You ever feel, Sarah, like you just wish you could call Contact 6 for something?
Where you're like, I'm so frustrated by fill in the blank consumer issue.
I know. I'm not allowed to help any of my coworkers. Or myself.
But I will tell you, I still learn from you, and I learn how, because you talk about the cutting through the clutter and getting to the people who can make decisions. And sometimes the people you're helping just don't know how to do that. And maybe they don't know where to go, and you know who to talk to, and that makes a big difference. It does help that you have the Contact 6 behind your name as well. But I had a recent situation, I won't go into detail, but it was a family situation that dealt with a medical issue, and they weren't getting proper response from their physician, and I thought, well, what else do I do? He's the doctor. How do you force a doctor to do something? And I thought, what would Jenna do? What would Jenna do? And I went,
WWJD, except
that
not
that doctor reports to someone. And I was able to identify who that doctor reports to. I made a reach out. Ultimately, the issue was resolved. But it was the idea of knowing where to go. Is such an important piece. Knowing how to cut through that clutter and get to the right place. It's not necessarily saying I want to speak to a supervisor. It's the idea of who can resolve this.
Well, and I think when you're in the situation, in the issue, you sometimes get so clouded with, like, I'm just so frustrated, and you can't, like, not see straight, but, like, you don't know, okay, what are other avenues? I just keep calling the same person, and they're not helping me. Taking that step back and going, okay, what are other places I can look to?
And if I could give consumers one bit of advice, it would be to try your best to stay as calm as possible. Customer service isn't going to want to help you as much if you're rude or if you're angry and yelling. We understand you're frustrated. It's probably totally legitimate, but you need to keep it calm, kill them with kindness, and just document every single interaction, the names of the people you spoke with, what you were told, and that will help you a lot. But I know it's so hard to keep your cool. I've had moments on the phone too where I've snapped or something and said something that I regretted, but try your best.
I had someone recently describe that kind of that anger, that frustration there was an unmet expectation, and when you are in that powerless situation and you expect someone to resolve something that seems to you plain and obvious, that can be very frustrating. But you said there was one tip; it's really two in there, because I think the maybe just as important, if not more important, one is to document.
Yeah.
If you know who you talked to. If they'll only give you a first name, get the first name. If they'll give you both, great. What was the time? What was the day? What was the number you called? Were you transferred to a different number?
Yeah.
Keep it in a notepad. And we'll see. You've seen people who are really meticulous about that.
So helpful.
And how helpful that is.
Keep the emails, create a folder, keep everything in one place. Don't get rid of it just because you think the issue is resolved. Keep all the receipts. Receipts help a lot because sometimes we require a lot of documentation to help someone. For example, with auto repairs, that's a hard one to prove without documentation, especially if you're alleging that the shop did something to harm your vehicle. We're probably going to ask you, go to a different shop, get documentation that supports what you're saying this something was done to your vehicle that was wrong, and then we can send it along. So that's one area in particular. I do have our top 6 complaints by type this year.
I like that.
If you want to hear it. So our number 6 complaint was insurance issues this year. So that's difficulty with coverage and claims for homeowners insurance, life insurance, auto, and travel insurance. We kind of put that all together in one category.
And this is based on the number of complaints you receive, correct?
Yes, so we're just kind of identifying trends in what consumers are reaching out to us. So this might be someone who applied for life insurance and was denied. We spoke with one man this year who was denied life insurance because someone had stolen his identity and done some things that made him ineligible for life insurance. So we were able to reach out, say that this is proof that he was a victim of identity theft and he was granted life insurance, which was great. The number 5 on our list is wireless companies. We hear a lot of issues with cell phone, cable, internet. The good news is those companies are really good at resolving legitimate issues when we reach out to them. So those might be issues with promotions, devices, billing, and we have a good success rate working on those cases.
Earlier in the year, I had a wireless
I
issue.
remember
I remember talking about saying, I wish I could call Jenna Sachs, and I can't, but it ended up getting resolved. It just took a while.
Right. Number 4, as we mentioned, was auto repairs, so issues that arise with oil changes, tires, engines, new or used parts, auto shops damaging vehicles. Again, document in that kind of situation. Number 3, this is kind of rising, banking issues. So this could have to do with fraud or issues with ATMs or money transfers in money payment apps. We get a lot of complaints about these money transfer apps. There's just not as many consumer protections with them.
Venmo and Cash App and things like that?
Right. I don't want to name anyone,
but I mean, those
yes,
examples.
those are examples of it.
Right, yes.
Yeah, because sometimes when that money is sent, you can't get it back. It's sent, and proving fraud can be hard, and customer service sometimes isn't as great with these companies, so it can be hard to get their attention.
Just curious, is crypto within that? Because we're starting to hear about crypto complaints too, right? Crypto scams and things, or does that not fall under that?
That would usually fall under our scams category.
Okay.
So we haven't really had complaints about legitimate crypto. The complaints we tend to get about scam use of crypto, or telling people to pay in crypto and then the money is stolen. Number 2 on our list, this has been number 1 in the past, but home contractors. So this involves projects that are paid for and they're either not finished or not even started, or maybe there's poor workmanship involved. So we will send letters to contractors asking them to return to a site or fix something, and often that is pretty effective as well. And then our number 1, medical billing. So the No Surprises Act did cut down on a number of medical billing issues that we see, but we still do see issues with medical and dental bills and health insurance denials or claims that are smaller than people expected. And that can happen for a number of different reasons. For example, someone may get billed for an appointment a year later and are told you shouldn't have to pay that because it's been so long they forgot to bill you. That might be an example of a medical billing issue that we might see.
It's obviously an area where there's widespread frustration, and in some ways that's evidenced by some of the reaction we've seen to the very high-profile case, the murder of the United Healthcare CEO. Just the national discussion and conversation that's happening around that awful situation, but also raising questions about how how people feel, their frustrations with
Right.
medical billing, and you're seeing that in just the number of
We
complaints.
definitely see that, and I would remind people that they do have appeal rights. They can file appeals even if they're initially denied. They can go back to their doctor. They can ask if something can be coded differently, or they can ask for more documentation to try to support their claim. But I can speak to that frustration. We are very familiar with all the major insurance providers, and they do resolve issues with us that they feel are legitimate. There are other cases where they won't, but they know us, they know our segment and what we do, and they do a good job of responding.
One of the things also that you have been super successful at, you and Annette, is our Fox local program, Ask Contact 6.
Yeah.
So just remind people, if they haven't seen it yet, what is Ask Contact 6?
Yeah, this is fun. We started this year, and basically it's a segment where we solicit questions from our viewers on a topic that we've chosen, a consumer topic, and then we bring in a panel of experts to answer their questions directly. So we've done, what have we done? We've done medical billing, we've done auto repairs as a topic, we've talked about issues with landlords and tenants issues. So it's really been fun for us to sit down with these experts and ask them the questions. We never know what we're going to get from people. We've talked about banking issues. That was interesting
And they're
as
actual
well.
questions from actual people. This isn't
Yeah.
just like from the head of Jenna and Annette. It's,
No.
it's actually people that are like, I have questions. I haven't been able to figure out the answer. And now you get to be that conduit and ask the
Right. It'll be like,
experts.
this question is from Sandy in New Berlin, and Sandy is having an issue with her car. She took it in for an oil change and now it doesn't work. What are her options? So that's been really fun, and it's also just added to our knowledge base. I think it's been really helpful for us to just learn during that hour-long discussion
From
that
the
we have.
experts that you've brought in.
Yeah, and experts have been really eager to participate, and we've been having a good time with it. So those episodes are available on Fox Local, which is our TV streaming app, and we're just getting ready to tape another segment next week where we're talking about small claims court. So this could be evictions, this could be money claims, or injury.
Is it
personal
worth
injury
taking
issues.
someone to small claims court? Like
Right.
that's,
Like people don't understand, how do I file? Do I need a lawyer? What are the costs going to be? What's the likelihood of me getting my money through this process? But basically, small claims is just a faster way of taking a case through the court system and trying to get your money back than pursuing things criminally.
Many years ago, I was working in Kansas City for Fox 4, and I did a profile of the small claims court there. I interviewed the small claims judge, and I remember him saying that these may be small dollar amounts.
Less than 10,000,
But
yeah.
some of the most intense human drama happens in a small claims courtroom because even though they may be smaller dollar amounts compared to some large civil case, to the
Yeah.
people involved, they're enormous dollar amounts, and they're often very personal issues.
Right. Well, something we see from time to time are issues with contractors that end up in small claims court. Those are long, drawn out, emotional experiences for people because they're so excited about their project.
Yeah.
And then they think it's going to start, and then it doesn't go as planned, and that can be really heartbreaking. And people have a high level of frustration when they feel like they've just been ignored or pushed aside. And if someone doesn't show up in court, who the filing is against, you usually are automatically awarded the judgment.
How can people submit their questions? Because you're still accepting questions.
So if for the Ask Contact 6 segment, if you go on fox6now.com and you scroll down, there's a blue button on the side of the page. It's a rectangle. It says Ask Contact 6. You can click on that. Or if you have a consumer complaint that you just want us to try to resolve, that's also on the right side of the page. It's another blue rectangle button called Submit a complaint to Contact 6. And we try to tackle as many cases as we can.
All right, I think we are going to wrap that part of things up and take a break. When we come back, we're going to go off the record. It is time to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question which we have not prepared for.
But I have a
she
Post-it.
has.
Oh, yay.
Right.
So the Green Bay Packers put this video out on their social media, and I thought it was, not only are those videos that they do hilarious, basically
Are these when the players are walking
yes,
by?
they have a
I
question
do like this, yeah.
on a board or however they do it. You don't ever
yeah,
see
it's
that
cute.
part. And then they're walking into practice and they answer the question, and it's usually hilarious. Okay, so I tailored this one more to us.
Okay.
Which Fox Sixer would you put as your emergency contact in your phone? Who is reliable? Who would answer if you had an emergency? Who wouldn't ask very many questions and just no problem, I will help you out?
I could tell you who has been one of my literal emergency contacts. Amanda St. Hilaire was one of my emergency contacts for a while. I mean, our kids were at the same daycare facility. And I also knew that she's an investigative reporter. If my school can't reach me, Amanda's going to figure out in about 2 minutes where I am, especially since we work together. So she was literally one of my emergency contacts for a while.
Look at that. Okay.
This is going to seem like I'm just buttering you up here, but it would be you.
What?
Because you're involved in so many things, and you always have to be reachable, and you're quick to respond. So your response is reliable.
Yeah.
Your response is going to be thoughtful. You're going to think through all of the possibilities because you have to balance a lot of things. I think it would probably be you, and probably you're the one I'm most reaching out to anyway, and bugging, and you'd be like, well,
fair.
it's just another call from Brian. So
That's fair.
you know.
Okay. Well, that's very nice
That's
of you.
very true.
That
I will
is
say
nice.
Amanda was for my kids' emergency contact, not for me.
Not for you.
Not for me.
I was trying to think. My first thought was like, who would pick up if they saw my name pop up on their phone? And I honestly, the first person, because I was like, man, they're so nice, is Tim Van Voren.
Aw.
I don't know. Like, would he pick up? I have no idea, but I feel like he'd be very responsive. Or Brian Cramp. Brian Cramp responds probably maybe like me. It's really quick. And I feel like he wouldn't ask a lot of questions if I needed him for an emergency.
I don't want any questions. Just can you do this?
Can you just
Can you
help
get
me?
this done? Yeah.
Don't ask why or how.
Tim, I don't know how quickly Tim would be able to respond, but he would be so nice about it when he did.
Nice about
he
it.
would
And-
just be like,
and
yeah,
I'd probably
Brian,
be
sure.
apologetic, and he's like, it's okay, it's no problem.
Hey, we'll make it happen.
You know, the good thing about this building is I feel like there's a lot of people
Yes.
that
Yeah.
we could
Yes.
rely on in an emergency.
Yes.
I don't know. It's kind of like a high school in that we're all very social and we all know each other and quite a bit about each other's lives as
right.
well. But it's
that's
just
good.
social that way, and we know more about each other, I think, than a lot of coworkers
Yes.
do.
Yes.
We're really good at the chit chat.
Yeah,
what, though?
very type A and
Yeah.
Over the years, I discovered this because for however many years, and you would know the same thing as you go out as a reporter, you are in the car with photographers. And so I got to know and have gotten to know the photographers really, really well over the years because you spend long drives in the car talking about life and how's family, how are the kids. And I don't get to know the other reporters as well. I know them socially in the newsroom. Maybe you go out after work once in a while. But I don't know the other reporters, especially when they cycle through and new ones come in as well. And I wonder if it's the same for photographers, where sure they know each other as coworkers, but man, they spend all kinds of time with all the reporters.
especially if they're some of those like general assignment photographers and reporters where they're maybe potentially getting a new reporter, not a new one, but they might get 5 in their work week, 5 different reporters
Right.
to sit and chat
But
with.
we're also in our isolated corner of the building. You and I,
Well,
the
that's
rest
true.
of the
That's a
building
good
is
point.
pretty social. All the photographers work together in the
That's
same
fair.
space. All the reporters and
the
producers, aside from us,
the
are in
I-Team
the same
Contact
room.
6 office has no windows.
Nope.
It has a couple of different
We don't know
little
when
offices.
it's raining. We don't know when
and
it's
it's so
snowing.
hot back there.
It
We
really
come out of the
is.
office and the sun has set and we had no idea.
No, I have had days back there where I'm coming out, or someone will come back to see me at 4:30 in the afternoon, and they're like, "Man, that wind and snow was something, huh?" And I'm like, "It snowed."
It's
I had
also
no idea.
hot in
foot
the
out
winter and cold in the summer,
Yeah.
so we have no idea what's happening in the
Yeah.
real world.
That's
It's
fair.
its own
Oh,
world.
you have your own private office suite? Listen to you griping. No, I mean, I'm not complaining. I do like that part of it. But no, the lack of windows is and isolate. Because we're away from things, it's not the place that everyone necessarily comes to talk.
Fair.
Like Dave Machuda's Edit
Well,
Day.
that's true.
Dave, you
That's
have
in
the
a-
most social place in the building.
That's like down
Everyone.
the hallway. Everyone
Yeah.
passes it.
Everyone stops by Dave.
And then
I can never get any work done.
That's
Right, exactly.
fair.
I was there the other day talking to Dave. I think we talked for about 30 minutes, and I was like, okay, time to go get some work done.
We need
Yeah.
to
So,
learn
yeah.
his mannerisms for when he's done with us. Like, you need to give us a subtle clue that you want us to go.
If Dave is in the middle of something, then I can kind of tell because he's like, yeah, okay. But a lot of times this is how I know he's not, because he'll go, well, while you're here, let me show you something. And then he'll pull up a video.
Right,
and we'll
right.
talk
Like
about
if
it.
he starts bringing
Yeah.
up new conversations,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, he's got the time.
Yeah, since you're here, let's take a look at a thing, and then we talk for 15,
Yeah.
20 minutes. Did you bring any backup questions? Because we still got a couple minutes left, or a minute or so left. No, nothing? All right. How about, because you were talking about the Packers when they walk by and they fire out the questions. I got to say, Packers social media, I don't know who's
they do a
running
good
it,
job.
but I'm trying to remember what the question was, and I think it had to do with, I don't know if it was just about, it might have been Thanksgiving related, because it might have been pies or something like that, but it was
Yeah.
such a good question.
Yeah.
And the answers.
What is your Thanksgiving pie? Like, what is your favorite?
For me, it's
Yeah.
pecan.
Pecan.
Oh,
Pecan.
yeah.
French.
Yeah.
I'm going to go all out and have French silk.
French silk. I requested that this year
Yeah?
from my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And at first she was like, oh, we already have apple and pumpkin and pecan. And I texted back and I was like, that's no problem. That's fine. And then they surprised me with it.
Oh, I ate it for breakfast
good.
the next day too.
Heck yeah.
It was great.
I know what the question was. It was something about, do you put Christmas decorations up before
Oh,
Thanksgiving?
yes.
And I don't remember who the player was. I remember him reacting to another player who said, yeah, I put them up right away. And he was like, you can go to jail for that. Or something. You should go to jail for that. Whatever it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was good.
Anyway, we'll go to jail if we don't wrap this up. So I'm going to take a break and we'll come back right after this. All right, that's about all we have time for this week. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. As always, thank you to the people who make this podcast possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, Contact Six's Jenna Sachs, our editor, Dave Machuda, and our chief photographer manning the video switcher. Well, he isn't today. I said that. Anyway, he sometimes does, Kale Zimney. With that, I'm Brian Polson. We'll be back next week. Actually, wait a minute. I got to clarify.
Next week we do. Next week we will.
Oh, we'll be back next week. Never mind. I'll talk about that later.
If you want us to be your emergency contact.
We'll see you next time.